ANEC Sports presents a Frick Media Productions, created by the founder and editor at the ANEC Network, Sam Frick. This is the opening drive. Hello and welcome to the first episode of the opening drive. My name is Sam Frick. I am the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, aka ANEC Sports, covering schools across Northeast Indiana and Elkhart County. That includes the schools down in Marion, Indiana. So for about 30 minutes of each episode, we will go through the upcoming slate of games for the area football schools, break down some of the things that went on from the previous week, and then look at some things to watch for each of our area games. If we are able to, we will also have an interview with a particular coach or a particular player leading up to the upcoming slate of games. And so, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our upcoming matchups coming up this week for our area schools. And we begin with the ACAC. And when you take a look at the ACAC right now, in the swing of things here, looking at the ACAC right now, the Jets, they defeated Garrett in week 1, 7-0. They won their 15th straight game, including at home and whatnot. They continue their home winning streak in that sorts against the Garrett Railroaders. Kind of a sloppy game for both teams. Garrett really never got things going offensively speaking. The Jets did just enough offensively to get the win, led by Jamison Roach's lone touchdown of the game. You had Vance Miller rushing for over 92 yards in that game. The defense really stole the show for both teams, both Adams Central and Garrett, although with the Jets, they are dealing with some injuries entering week 2. They had a couple linemen out for week 1 with Bloom and Nate Gierkin. They were out for week 1, and then unfortunately with Cam Fravel, he had to leave the game in the third quarter. He did not return. Hopefully the Jets can overcome this early season of injuries as the Jets go through the early stretch of the season. They will take on the Eastside Blazers at Eastside on Friday, August 29th. They will be facing an Eastside team that looks much improved from the previous season, a team that defeated Woodland in week 1, 38-6, led by quarterback Joe Bridgman, combining, I believe, for 4 touchdowns in that game. He threw for 80 yards, ran for about 178. In that contest, they have Noah Dove at running back for Eastside. They returned quite a bit back from last year's team on both ends of the field, and Eastside hopes they can be more competitive this year against the Jets than they were last year. In fact, the Eastside Blazers did represent the school for the sectional championship, falling to the Adams Central Flying Jets, the team that would go on to win the 2A state championship. Should be an interesting matchup. Eastside primarily runs the football, and so they're going to be heavy reliant on the ability to protect their quarterback and be able to block against an elite defensive unit of Adams Central, probably one of the best teams in terms of tackling in the entire area, if not the state of Indiana. And the other thing is, with Eastside, they're going to have to be very careful about the deception of the Jets wing T offense. So this is going to be kind of a preview for Eastside for what they're going to prepare for against Cherubusco later on in the season when they begin conference play, which is their small school division. The Jets, they are quick, obviously, but they have a sense of experience. They know how to win in a gritty fashion. They can win with their speed. They can win with their physicality. And obviously the Jets have multiple players that can step up and make plays when needed to. The one thing to watch for the Jets, obviously their offensive execution needs to be much better than it was in week 1. That is something Michael Mosher definitely noted. Coming out of that Garrett game, the Jets are going to need more production from other players and get a little more support for the defense, because the Jets are not going to win every game 7-0. So obviously they're going to have to improve offensively, hope to protect the football better, limit those turnovers, and hopefully get better production in the line of scrimmage on Friday night, because the Eastside Blazers do have some weapons that can make things difficult for Adams Central otherwise. Another key matchup to watch, Delta at Heritage. The Heritage Patriots, they are basically in a retool stage, but essentially they are mostly the same as last year in terms of the way they can create damage on both sides of the field. And we saw a little bit of Lucas Weber on Friday against Belmont. We saw a lot from their quarterback, another Tagulis. I believe this time it is Zeb Tagulis, if I recall, for the Heritage Patriots. I believe he's just a sophomore. He threw for over 300 yards, I believe, and 5 touchdowns against the Belmont Braves. But this is going to be a much more challenging, not necessarily more challenging per se. South Adams will definitely be, not South Adams, Delta. But they will have a much more difficult matchup on Friday night when they host the Delta Eagles, a team that eliminated Heritage last season in sectional play. Delta is coming off a 16-13 loss at the hands of Muncie Central at Delta. And I apologize that my dog is barking in the background, but she does bark quite a bit when she sees people outside. So I apologize in advance for that. Anyway, Delta is coming off a 16-13 loss to Muncie Central in their first game under Billy Lynch. So new head coach, but relatively a pretty solid Delta squad that Heritage is going to have to deal with once again on Friday night in Monroeville. I'm sure that loss from last year is fresh on their minds as the Heritage Patriots look to build off of their Week 1 performance. One other thing to note here, the Bluffton Tigers in Week 1 came back to defeat Shenandoah with 19 seconds left in the ballgame, 29-27 on a 30-yard field goal from their freshman kicker, and for whatever reason it is blanking me right now, so let me go ahead and take a look here. The Bluffton Tigers came out to beat Shenandoah 29-27 at Shenandoah thanks to a 30-yard field goal from their freshman kicker Ethan Ribich with just under 20 seconds left to defeat Shenandoah. But obviously when you have a quarterback like Aston Best, you obviously have a chance to win ball games. And obviously you have AJ Strevler back, you got Cooper Craig back, Kamel Bohr back. This is a Bluffton team that returns, I believe, 20 starters on this team. So this is a very experienced Bluffton team. They're going to be hosting the Manchester Squires on Friday, a team that is coming off a solid win at Northwestern on Friday, 33-21. And Manchester has a really good quarterback for the Squires. And trying to remember exactly the name here. I'm still getting acclimated to our new members of ANEC Sports, so this is going to take some time to get acclimated to some of the names at Manchester, for instance, and whatnot. Give me just a moment here. I'll probably cut this out. They were led by a talented quarterback in senior Dallas Martin, threw for 2 touchdown passes, and he completed, I believe it was 10 of 14 for 262 yards. No picks in the process. QBR of 153.3 as the Squires defeated Northwestern in Kokomo. So this will be a solid matchup for Bluffton as they prepare for ACAC play 1 week from Friday. Some other matchups to watch: Belmont at South Adams. The Starfires will be heavily favored, coming off a 56-0 loss to Marion Local. Titus Lehman's back in a senior quarterback. You got a lot of weapons back at South Adams. They are going to definitely look to get that first win under their belts against Belmont. Central Noble is at Woodland. Both teams are coming off of blowout losses. We'll talk about CN later on when we talk about West Noble. Blackhawk Christian is taking on Southern Wells at Taylor University. The Braves were shut out. I don't think they were shut out, actually. They lost to Fremont 42-6 at Fremont. Meanwhile, Southern Wells had a much more competitive loss at Elwood, 14-8. The Southern Wells Raiders have lost their last 11 games. Are looking to pick up. Not last 11 games. They have lost their last 20 games. The Southern Wells Raiders have lost their last 20 football games, looking to pick up their first win since August 18th of 2023 when they take on Blackhawk Christian at Taylor University. And that is the slate in the ACAC for Friday. And then Saturday, Jay County is at Newcastle at 1 o'clock. Jay County coming off a 56-6 victory over Blackford at home. Newcastle, on the other hand, they are coming off a loss at the hands of Franklin County, 27-13. This is an opponent that Jay County has struggled in the past, where they were defeated by Jay County. They were defeated by Newcastle 20-0 at Jay County last year. So that does it for the ACAC. We take a look at the CIC, and when you look at the CIC for our Grant County schools, Eastbrook coming off a thrilling 21-20 win over Huntington North, despite the fact Eastbrook, I believe, only had 9 first downs in that game. They ran well below 100 yards, it seemed, for the Eastbrook Panthers. They were able to force some turnovers, and eventually a couple bounces went their way. Huntington North missed a PAT late in the game as the Panthers defeated Huntington North 21-20. They are going to be traveling to Concordia to take on the Cadets, a team they struggled last season against Concordia. They're hoping for some success this time around as they return a more experienced roster back, led by their quarterback in, I believe it's Bodie Howe of Eastbrook. Obviously, with a kid like Bodie Howe, it's a really good quarterback that can run. He obviously he has got electric speed at quarterback for the Eastbrook Panthers, a team that traditionally runs the football at will. And so this will be a challenging matchup for Concordia, a team that is coming off a 20-point loss at Indy Cincinnati, but I think this will be a very competitive Week 2 ball game, potentially a trap game for Eastbrook if they're not careful. They're going to have to be much sharper offensively if they're going to be able to beat the Cadets on Friday. Meanwhile, Oak Hill is coming off a 4-point loss at the hands of Eastern Greentown, 26-22. They are hosting the Norwell Knights, a team that was shut out by Mississauga, 35-0. Oak Hill, I think this is their first meeting in a while against Norwell under Bud Usman for Oak Hill, and the Eagles are coming up with a 6-4 record last season. They replaced Southwood with the Norwell Knights, a team that traditionally is in Oak Hill sectional in a lot of sports. And so this is a very familiar opponent for Oak Hill fans. And this is a game where I would expect Oak Hill to be favored in that contest. Blackford, as I mentioned, looking to bounce back, coming off a 50-point loss to Jay County. They are going to be hosting the Fremont Eagles, who won by 36 against the Blackhawk Christian Braves. And so you got a team in Fremont with confidence. Blackford team looking to reset and get a win here. Although last season Blackford was victorious against Fremont in an 18-0 win on the road. But remember, this was under a different regime, a different team. Now you got Steve Bougier back for the Blackford Bruins, looking to get a home win to get things going the right direction for the Blackford Bruins. And then Mississauga will host the Marion Giants. Both teams are 1-0 to begin the season. Marion had to do so in comeback fashion, where Tim Jones had a monster performance. He ran for 178 yards, threw for 155 yards, and was involved in basically every touchdown for Marion in a 48-42 win over the Southside Archers. Tim Jones was the hero for the Marion Giants, but can they get a much sharper defensive performance against a much more defensively sound Mississauga squad, who is coming off a shutout win against the Norwell Knights at Norwell? Ole Miss looking to get their home fans down in Gas City, smiling to kick off the 2025 home slate for the Mississauga Indians. And I think that is all, except for Southwood at Madison Grant. That's the other matchup to watch here. Southwood coming off a 42-point loss to Rochester to open TRC play. As for Madison Grant, a team that's been kind of quietly been a contender in 1A over the last few years, they're coming off a 42-point win at Tri-Central. So, based on that, you would expect the Ardiles, I have to make sure I pronounce it correctly. The Ardiles will probably be favored in that one. I hope to not make that mistake in the future. All right, we continue on with the Northeast 8s. And when you look at the NEA, Angola with a 14-6 win over the Cal Barons. And Hawk Hasselman now being used at running back. They finally have a quarterback that's consistent enough where they don't have to always use Hawk Hasselman at running back. I think that's huge. Dallas Davison for Angola was huge in that win over the Cal Barons, a team that's had Angola's number the last couple years, although it's been traditionally a competitive series since it revived about 10 years ago. So it's been a close game in the past between these two teams. Angola finally getting that win against the Cal after a couple straight losses to the Barons. Now can Angola go 2-0 for the first time since really 2018? Well, they're going to have to go to Leo to take on the Leo Lions, a team that is coming off a very gritty, hard-earned win against Bishop Lures, 14-7 at Leo. It was Nathan Foster, and then I believe it was Paul Woods that had the touchdowns for the Leo Lions in that victory over Bishop Lures. It really took a hard-earned team performance for the Leo Lions, a team that also defeated Bishop Lures last year, relatively in similar fashion. Close game, really, the past couple years between these two teams. Really, it's become a nice season-opening rivalry between these two schools. And now can Leo build off of that and go 2-0 as they enter, once again, a very competitive Northeast state for the Leo Lions. It will be a competitive game on paper, but we'll see if Angola can stop the run. That will be something to keep an eye on for the Angola Hornets, is can they stop the run of Leo? And more importantly, is can Angola generate enough offense against, I would say, a much stronger defense. I know it's a younger defense, but it's still a very good defense at Leo. Other things to note here, and I'll save the Cal Garrett for last in this section, as well as Snider East. Huntington North and Northup would be another intriguing matchup. This was a back-and-forth game last year where actually it took 2 days for this game to be completed because of Mother Nature interfering with its original schedule. They had to be played on Saturday. Huntington North eventually pulled off the win against Northup by the score of 58-37. They went 2-0 to begin that 2024 season, en route to a 9-4 campaign and a sectional championship. Huntington North looking to avoid going the exact opposite of that, looking to get a win against Northup. That's going to be difficult to do so because Northup looks much improved from the previous season, and it seems like the quarterback for Northup, Mr. Callison himself, he looks much improved as well from the previous season and whatnot. And we know from his talents that David Callison is obviously a very proven quarterback. He threw for over 300 yards, completed about 70% of his passes, I believe, and threw for 5 touchdowns, much like last time against New Haven. And then Quade Guilford caught 2 of those passes, and we know Quade Guilford is going to be a Division I football player. And so we know with Northup, this is an explosive offense. But as I've always stated with Northup, they have not really been tested yet. They played New Haven, a rebuilding New Haven team. They are not the same program as they were 2 years ago. Let's make sure we keep reality in check here. They are not proven yet as an SAC contender. What they do against Huntington North will show me where Northup is entering the slate of games in the SAC. Are the Northup Bruins truly that much better than last year, or did they just play New Haven? And to me, right now, they're a little better than last year, but I still want to see more as they face a solid Huntington North team that does replace some decent players. But when you got Jimmy Linker on the Huntington North squad, it's still a pretty respectable Viking squad under Mike Eschbach. Let's see here. Plymouth at Columbia City. The Eagles will be favored. They're coming off a 27-24 win over Northwood, their first win against the Panthers since 1977. Northside coming off a 21-7 win against Northridge. Jaden Rivers and the Legends will be favorites against New Haven in that contest. And then we get to our NEC Games of the Week, which will involve a Northeast State school. First of which is DeKalb at Garrett, the rivalry across the tracks. It's been that way for most of the entire history of these two schools since DeKalb opened its doors in 1967. There was a hiatus at some point in the 90s through the 2000s. It did resurrect in the early 2010s and has remained that way ever since. Last season, DeKalb came into this matchup at home with a 1-0 record, just like Garrett. DeKalb knew they had a chance last year against the Garrett Railroaders. Garrett was up 3 scores to begin that contest. They were up 21-0, I believe, early on in that contest. Then you had the rain coming through, delayed the game, seemingly halted some of the momentum of Garrett. Then Garrett started to make some mistakes, took some bad penalties, especially with DeKalb punting in those situations. And the Barons did eventually rally back to force overtime. And DeKalb actually had a chance to even win the game. They were up, I believe they were up 30-27, and they kicked the field goal to take the lead. All they had to do was get a stop, and they win the game. They held Garrett to 4th down and goal. Last play of the game, Garrett goes to Calder Hefty, and he comes in the right side, gets the touchdown, and Garrett wins the game 33-30. And we know the rest is history. Garrett would go on to have a historic season, win the NECC's Bid-School Division, go 13-1, make it all the way to semi-state, 1/2 away from going to state, and Garrett eventually falling to Bishop Lures. As for DeKalb, they would go on to have relatively a disappointing season, going 4-6. But some of those games, I mean, especially that Garrett game, they had an opportunity right there to really, really get some confidence. And unfortunately, it was just kind of a deflating game for DeKalb. Now the Barons, coming off a tough loss to Angola, can they bounce back on the road against Garrett's at Garrett's? Not an easy place to do so. And I think the key thing's going to be, number one, for Garrett, can their offense get anything going? They did not move the football very well at all against Adams Central, despite the fact they only lost by 7 points. Can Wyatt Hefty be more comfortable at quarterback in his second game? He was not comfortable in game 1. Can he be more comfortable this time around against, not to say DeKalb's an inferior team, but their defense is definitely not to the level of Adams Central, so there will be more opportunities for Garrett to move the football. The thing for DeKalb is can the Barons be consistent on both ends of the field? They show that on defense they can be good, they can play hard, but the offense has to be able to be in sync as well. And with DeKalb having some moving parts, if you would, they're still a relatively talented team, but they are a little bit inexperienced compared to last year, particularly at quarterback. But Eli McCormick is capable of what he can do at quarterback. They do have some weapons led by Xavier Bell. The thing with DeKalb is all about execution to the little details and be consistent. That is something Ryan Robertson has always stated really since the start of the season. That's a game to really watch there. Meanwhile, Snider is at East Snowball coming up later on the show. You'll see my interview or hear my interview with Coach Tippman of the Snider Panthers, a longtime coach of Snider football. In his 17th season as head coach, he's been with the program, I think he said, for 35 years overall. So that shows you he has been a part of most of Snider's history in football, and they're coming off a 38-30 loss to the Warsaw Tigers, a team that ran for 462 yards on 47 carries, no passes whatsoever. And Snider, this is going to be a much different matchup because Snider is going to face an East Snowball team that doesn't run the ball as much as Warsaw, although they do run the ball effectively, and they got weapons of the wideouts to expand their game in the passing game. East Snowball looks very good against Wayne. 42-0 win at Wayne. Riley Biddle was Riley Biddle quarterback. Alex Scott only needed 4 catches for 152 yards. Really, East Snowball was just, they were firing all cylinders against Wayne. Although Wayne is not the best team in the SAC. They're not a bad team per se, but not the best SAC team out there. Snider will certainly be a more of a formidable matchup for the East Snowball Knights, a team that Snider returns a lot back from last season. They return a lot of sophomores. They got some experience back from last season. They still think they're capable of making a run in the 6A state tournament. They show flashes of potential last season, despite the fact they weren't able to really get that sectional championship against the Carroll Chargers and whatnot. And with Snider, you got guys like Jordan Davis at running back, one of the top running backs in the area. You got Dotson coming in at tight end for the Snider Panthers. They got some experienced guys up front on offense and the defensive line for Snider. Owen Dotson was the guy I'm talking about for Snider. They had to replace some guys like Aaron Vance, and Brandon Logan was a big one. Landon, but they still bring back Kenyon Conklin. You got Braylon Fertile on this squad. You got their excellent kicker in Montung, who we all remember that famous. Unfortunately, we were having some technical difficulties towards the end of this segment, so I just want to go ahead and briefly recap what was going to be said after that matchup with Snider East Noble. The big thing I want to take away real quick with Snider East Noble is obviously with Snider, can they defend the run against East Noble with their athleticism? You know, especially one name to watch for East Noble other than Riley Biddle, quarterback, because he's the quarterback, and the safety for East Noble is going to be Alan Scott, the wide receiver, who had 4 catches for 152 yards and a couple touchdowns. But I also want to make sure I mention real quick with the rest of the SAC. I think the big thing here is what keep an eye on is Wayne at Riley, South Bend Riley. These two actually were supposed to play last year, and that never finished because of the weather that took place that weekend. So actually, this will be the first time that Wayne will play South Bend Riley. Hopefully, this time they can actually complete this game. This will take place at South Bend, where South Bend Riley defeated Hammond Bishop Knoll 35-0 in that contest. You got Homestead and Noblesville last year against Noblesville. They lost 49-6. They're coming off a 35-0 loss at Westfield. A little bit disappointing outcome for the Spartans as they look to improve upon that performance at Noblesville, a team that picked up a 21-6 win against Mount Vernon Fortville. And so the things are getting a lot tougher for Homestead before they get started with SEC play at Southside. And then another name to mention here is South Bend St. Joseph at Southside. The Archers coming off a disappointing ending to the game at Marion, where they were up 2 scores in that game. Unfortunately, they could not hold that lead. They lost by 6 to the Giants, and they got a tough test right now against St. Joe coming up on Friday. That's going to be a tough one for Southside before they get started with SEC play. And then lastly, Bishop Dwayne will host an Ohio school named St. Francis de Sales. And this is a powerhouse private school in Ohio. Dwayne coming off a 3-0 loss to Ron Cali on Friday. And so the Dwayne Saints looking to maintain a sense of competition, if you would, and hoping they can build upon their Week 1 performance going into SEC play 1 week from Friday. And then Saturday, Bishop Lures is at Andrean. 2 powerhouse small school programs in the state of Indiana. Lures coming off a tough 7-point loss to Leo, looking to bounce back against the always competitive Andrean Fighting 59ers, who fell to Merrillville 41-14. We expect this one to be a competitive game on Saturday at Andrean in the region. Can Lures get their first win of the season there? Lastly, we want to shift over to the Three Rivers Conference, and in this conference, we primarily want to highlight the upcoming matchup between Tippy Valley and Rochester, a rivalry school between these two former conference rivals. Rochester still in TRC. Valley is now in the Northern States Conference. Valley coming off a 23 win over Plymouth. Rochester dominating Southwood 42-0, but Rochester has a tough test ahead of them against the Valley Vikings, who have had their number in recent years, as Valley defeated Rochester last season by the score of 22-12 in Death Valley. This time it's at Rochester. Zebras could be competing for the Three Rivers Conference Championship late in the season, and we could see a Week 9 championship game potentially between Rochester and McConaughey, but that's a time to discuss later. Wabash is at North Miami. Apaches got crushed by McConaughey 61-20. They looked to bounce back against North Miami, a team that defeated Northfield last week 44-15. North Miami, a former TRC member. They are a member of the Hoosier North Conference. And then lastly, Whitco's at Peru. Wildcats getting their first win of the season, their first win in 2 years, and the first win for Thomas Tyree as the head coach. Can the Cats go 2-0 at Peru? Will be a tough test, but the Cats will be able to have an opportunity to build upon their Week 1 performance against the Peru Bengal Tigers. And so that is going to do it for this episode. I apologize for the technical difficulties. We're trying a different format, if you would, to see if it might work slightly better. We are not going to use that format in the future. We'll probably go back to what we normally use to record videos, but we just wanted to try things out to see how it works for this episode. So, without further ado, here's my interview with Kurt Tippman of the Snider Panthers. Joining me is the head football coach of the Snider Panthers, Kurt Tippman, as his team prepares for a Week 2 matchup up in Kendallville to take on the East Noble Knights. Coach, brand new season. It feels like every year is always something different with the high school football season. But for what you've seen from Week 1 to now, what are some takeaways coming out of that first game against Warsaw and a tough loss?
Well, I think we have lots of new guys, playing. I think is the case every year in high school football. There's always a bunch of new faces, and the challenge is to get those guys ready to perform well on Friday night. That's our job as coaches is to get those guys to continually improve each week, and to gain the necessary experience so that they can have success on Friday nights. And that's one of the cool parts about playing quality teams in the non-conference part of the schedule at the beginning of the year. You get really good competition, and to hopefully get some of those mistakes and get some of that newness out of these new guys and shake the rust off of the old guys so that we're primed and ready to go for a conference schedule. In the SAC, that's a tough conference road, and likewise with East Noble and their conference. So I think the the importance of playing somebody really good, quality programs, um, adds to our urgency to improve during these first couple of weeks to be ready to go week 3 in the conference.
Mm-hmm. Before we talk about this season, I want to just kind of shift back, kind of give you a brief background of you being the coach at Snider and whatnot. We have a lot of viewers that are from diverse communities and whatnot, maybe don't recognize Snider to the level that of you and I recognize Snider. So maybe just briefly talk about your road with the Snider program and talk about just how special it is to be part of Snider football, because it's a very unique community in the sense of this football program.
Yeah, I started. Yeah, and you're broke up a little bit, so I'm kind of put out the right question. But um, the I came to the Snider football program when I was in middle school, and had an older sibling that attended Snider, and I started working out in the summer with their athletic development program way back in the 80s. And Coach Hawley was the head coach, and they welcomed me in, and then I attended Snider in the mid 80s, and played for Coach Hawley and Coach Isaacs and Coach Bush, and had just an outstanding experience. Was everything I wanted high school football to be. An undersized kid that really loved the game. They gave me the opportunity to play, and I just had a great experience. And I knew when I left high school that I wanted to do that for a profession, and to be a high school coach and a high school teacher. And so I went to Indiana University and spent 4 years there, or really 6 years there, as an assistant and a graduate assistant coach. But came back and had the opportunity to be on guys staff as an assistant. Came back in 1994, and was an assistant, all the way up until I think 2008 or 9, when he became the athletic director. Then I was able to become the head coach, and so I believe this is my 30th or 31st year in the program as a coach, and then couple that with 4 years as a player. So 35 years in the program, and the memories, the people that I've been fortunate to work with, both mentors, colleagues, friends. Um, it's just been something that's always added to my career. I think, I always say that I became a better husband because of the guys I worked with. I became a better father because of the guys I worked with. I became a better teacher because of the guys I worked with, a better coach because of the guys I work all.
All right, coach. So now let's go ahead and shift over to this year's squad. You were excited about this group coming into the season. A lot of talented sophomores coming in. You always have a very talented offensive, defensive line. Obviously, with Warsaw, you know what you expect with Warsaw with Bart Curtis. And, they ran 47 times for 462 yards, no passing attempts whatsoever. But that's kind of what they've been known for so many years with Warsaw. And this was a game where I think there were about 7 lead changes in that game. You were up 10 to start, and it kind of would seesaw the whole way through. And so with Warsaw, that was a good first test. So with East Snowball, it was a little bit of a different matchup coming up in Kendallville. What are some things that stand out to you about East Snowball as you prepare for them on Friday night?
Well, certainly the quarterback is the guy that kind of makes their offense run. Very talented guy, good athlete. I think has been a player for them for the last 3 years, or the 3 years that we've played them. 2 years previously, either on defense or on offense last year. Very talented guy, very quality quarterback, can make all the throws, and certainly has hooked up with number 4. And that he goes up and gets the ball, has a very good knack for the deep ball, and been very productive in the scrimmage and the first game that we've been able to see. And so that's a big concern. They're well coached on the offensive line. They do a good job, and their running game is when you couple that with a stout passing game, that balance is something that you always worry about in defending them. So our work will be cut out for us for sure, trying to address and curtail their offensive power. Defensively, they're not as big as they've been in the past, but they're quick, they're fast, and very athletic. And so that causes problems with the speed. And again, well coached, very, very disciplined, and present lots of that with good players, and that just poses a great challenge for us on Friday night.
Yeah. And when you look at the Snider team, again, it's a team with a lot of returnees on both ends, on the offensive and defensive line. Obviously, Jordan Davis, really talented running back for the Snider Panthers. Owen Dotson, tight end. Got Kenyon Coughlin, defensive line. So you got some leadership back. You got some young kids with some talent. That's something we always expect with Snider these days and whatnot with this Panther squad. You are obviously excited about the potential this team has. But I guess my last question to you is, as you go into Kendallville, what's that process like for your team as you focus on East Snowball, and what are things you're hoping to see improvements on Friday night as you look to compete for the SAC once again in a program that always expects?
Well, we know that Kendallville will be hopping on Friday night. Yeah, we know Kendallville will be hopping on Friday night. The whole town will be there, and it'll be a really cool environment and a hostile environment. Us being the visiting team, that's something that we're embracing. That challenge of going into an opposing team's home field and school, and being the road warriors is kind of something that we embrace that challenge. And that's what's going to happen when you get deep into the regular season and championship game type scenario and in the playoffs. And so we relish it as a great opportunity to preview what we hope to be in when it gets to late October and early November. And so we're embracing all the things that come with it and the challenge that presents itself on Friday night. For us, we have to play better at every position than we did our first game. Every kid needs to play with better fundamentals, better technique, better effort, and better execution, both as individual players and then as units, whether it be offense, defense, and each of our special teams. We have to play better, and we have to execute better And those are keys for us to, be able to combat um, what will be, a great high school football atmosphere on Friday night.
It certainly will be. In Kendallville, always a great fan base up there, and football fanatic up in Kendallville. So one of the top games in the area to watch will be the Snider Panthers and the East Noble Knights. Coach, any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, it's fun to play East Noble, and I think we're looking forward to a great atmosphere, and we enjoyed going up there the last time. A very cool environment, and we're looking forward to the same thing this week.
All right, this is Kurt Tippman of the Snider Panthers. They look to get their first win of the season against the East Noble Knights. Coach, good luck to you and your team on Friday night.
Thank you.